it was mind-blowing. You can see all these concentric rings. It's been likened to sort of God's thumbprint in some sort of corners of the internet. So there's lots and lots of things all have to be happening at once. It's sort of this high set of unlikely chances have to line up.
Wildlife experts say the world is losing animals at an alarming rate. The World Wildlife Fund looked at the data on more than 5,000 animal species between 1970 and 2018 and found populations, on average, dropped by 69%. Latin America saw some of the largest losses, including so much of the Amazon rainforest that the WWF now says it's nearly non-functional. Researchers say right now 1 million animal and plant species face extinction.
Hundreds of pilot whales have become stranded in New Zealand. Approximately 500 of them have beached themselves on the remote Chatham Islands off the coast of the South Island.
Well, Gab, it's happened over two separate events, last Friday and again this Monday that just passed. But essentially what's happened is that 500 pilot whales have become stranded on separate incidents. As I say, on the Friday and the Monday, around 230 on the Friday and then a further 245 on the Monday. Now, we know that pilot whales become beached or become stranded quite often. What we don't know is why. So a number of people are researching the incident. Just last month in Tasmania, around 230 pilot whales became stranded off Tasmania's west coast, and again 200 of those died. To the day 2 years ago on that same island in Tasmania, 470 pilot whales became stranded. So it's quite an issue.
And we've got an eye on Earth and an alarming update from the U.S. Drought Monitor. According to a new report, 55% of the country is experiencing drought conditions. The drought has been spreading since the beginning of September and now covers more of the nation than it has since April. More than 133 million people live in drought areas, which is the highest number since 2016. The Mississippi River is experiencing critically low water levels, so are many of its, like the Illinois, Ohio, and Missouri rivers.
Earth's wildlife populations are in crisis. The Living Planet report, tracking a selection of global vertebrate numbers, has recorded staggering losses and found that population sizes declined by 69% on average in just 50 years.
Of being with us.
Thank you.
They are really sad scenes we're seeing, but it's all too familiar. A similar incident happened the day before. What's going on?
We don't know. We simply do not know. So whale strandings are a mystery because if we knew why and when they would happen, we'd try and prevent them, but we just don't. Yeah, and the fact that this stranding yesterday occurred the same day as a previous stranding 2 years ago involving the same species is interesting. But also the fact that there was 14 sperm whales in a similar location stranded a day before that. What's going on?
A frightening quake has shaken Mexico on a day viewed by some as cursed. The nation's residents had paused to remember the victims of two deadly tremors when hours later, another one struck.
Dr. Jones, we mentioned this before. Your reaction. September 19th is a day that's had two earthquakes, and an hour before this quake, they'd had a nationwide earthquake drill. That is such an odd coincidence.
It is an odd coincidence.
The ceremony had just been held to mark the anniversary of two other major quakes. 5 years ago, more than 350 people died, and in 1985, the devastation in Mexico was widespread.
And of course, on September 19th, 1985, an earthquake in Mexico killed 5,000.
Since 1985, it's happened now 3 times in this one day. It is just an unusual coincidence.
Lunchtime in Mexico and the earth is jolted. High above the ground, they had nowhere to go.
Oh my God, look at the other buildings. They're all swaying.
Religious mass wasn't spared as panic and confusion spread on the street.
Oh my God, everything's really flying around.
From hotel rooms in Puerto Vallarta.
The 7.6 magnitude quake centered on the Pacific coast.
We've got some more breaking news overnight as well. A powerful 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck Mexico, killing at least 2 people.
This is the second quake in the area this week. A 7.6 magnitude earthquake shook the area on Monday.
But it could be felt hundreds of miles away in Mexico City. It all comes just 3 days after another deadly quake about 200 miles away on the Pacific coast.
Well, check this out. This is Devil's Hole at Death Valley. So on Monday, park rangers there were able to tell that there was an earthquake somewhere just by watching the water move in Devil's Hole. Now, this was a result of that 7.6 quake that shook in Mexico. This is how, like, water sloshes in your pool when there's an earthquake. So many of you remember that Devil's Hole is also home of the endangered pupfish.
A 7.8 deadly earthquake struck that same area just 3 days ago. That's always a reminder for us here in California.
We're
have to
along
be
that fault
prepared.
line.
We sure are.
I was thinking about that because last week we had 3 earthquakes pretty much in a row. And I was thinking to myself, I'm not prepared at all. Like, if it happened in the middle of the night, do I put my mattress over me? So I started thinking and researching. And it's a good reminder to all of us.
To California now, where a 4.4 magnitude earthquake rattled some nerves near Santa Rosa last night. Initial quake was followed by a strong aftershock just 1 minute later.
One resident said that her dogs were acting strangely about 10 seconds before the quake hit.
A hair-raising moment in Santa Rosa last night at 6:39 p.m. as a 4.4 earthquake hit.
Now to the North Bay, where neighbors in Santa Rosa have noticed a strange side effect from last week's earthquake, a surge in water flowing right through a popular creek.
Quake, obviously, we kind of get our bearings.
John McCauley and Suzanne Dickinson felt the shaking and soon after saw that Mark West Creek near their home looked different than it did before.
The creek went from looking like a pond, no discernible flow, to look like waves of flow, so it was increasing dramatically in this time span of minutes.
Right after the quake?
Right after the quake.
And that was the first thing for me. I looked out the window and I was like, wow, all the rocks are gone.
Obviously something shifted around to increase the flow dramatically. We looked at it and it looked like there was a wave of water coming down the stream. Wow. And it was as if you were at the seashore and you watch the wave break and the wave washes up on it, and each successive wave kind of washes up further and closer as the tide is coming in. That's what I would liken it to.
One KCRA viewer shared this video with us. Take a look. She had some damage at her home. Quite a few of her wine bottles came crashing down, at least one of them.
Yeah, and animals are very keen at sensing earthquakes. This cat was clearly shaken up. You could hear it. KPIX 5's Betty Yu is in downtown Santa Rosa, where the quake even disrupted some dinner plans.
Crazy. Everything was shaking. The chef ran out.
Customers felt 2 jolts.
An official one felt like everybody was like scared. The second one, everybody ran out. It was pretty intense.
Taiwan's president has activated the island's Central Emergency Operations Center, responding to a 6.9 magnitude earthquake that hit the southeast corner of Taiwan earlier today.
Severe aftershocks continue to rock Taiwan in the wake of the 6.9 magnitude earthquake that struck southern regions of the island.
This quake was reported overnight. It was so strong that it toppled a 3-story building. Several people were rescued from beneath the rubble.
Nearly 150 others were injured. The quake derailed trains, causing buildings to collapse, and trapped hundreds on mountains and roads. Now, a tsunami warning was issued in the moments following the earthquake.
A badminton game pauses, then the world comes crashing down. Taiwan shaken. A 6.9 magnitude quake on Sunday afternoon crumbled this 7-Eleven store and apartment building. 4 people, including a child, were rescued here. Japan issued a tsunami warning, but the waves stayed down. In Taiwan, the tremor stranded tourists and shook trains. Some derailed. Riders were brought to a halt on this road. The mountain slipped, streets cracked, and some disappeared. 23 years ago, almost to the day, 2,400 people died. A different outcome this time.
And then here in Taipei, at my place, 200 miles away, the shaking was so intense and has been continuing that even in the aftershocks, you almost feel like you're on a boat when the building starts swaying back and forth. No serious damage, but I'll tell you what, I feel motion sick, and I have for much of the day, as have much of my friends here in Taipei who live on a higher floor. And so everybody just kind of hoping that the worst of these quakes are over.
And so we need to remember that context, that what you feel isn't just the magnitude. It's that intensity number that really tells you what to expect in terms of damage.
And so now is a good time sort of to remind our viewers that we are living in earthquake country.
China is massively stockpiling food supplies ahead of the coming global famine. Bloomberg says that Chinese authorities are in panic mode. So far this year, they have snapped up more than half of the world's green supplies. At the same time, the United States is struggling to find alternative suppliers on the global market, and consumers are still experiencing shortages of a wide range of everyday necessities, while prices continue to reach stratospheric new highs. Even more worryingly, a new report says that America's food system could collapse like the 2008 banks, and the scenario for the next months look absolutely terrifying right now. That's what we are going to expose today. Reports show that China, which is home to less than 20% of the world's population, has managed to stockpile more than half of the globe's grains, leading to steep price increases across the planet and pushing more countries into famine. The Chinese government's massive food panic buying spree, which started in January, hasn't slowed in recent months, and now the United States Department of Agriculture estimates that China owns 69% of the world's corn reserves, 60% of its rice, and 51% of its wheat. Since the start of the year, China has spent $98.1 billion, importing food, up 4.6 times from a decade earlier. According to the General Administration of Customs of China, from January to September, the Eastern superpower has imported more food than it had since at least 2016, which is as far back as comparable data goes. Even though the country claims it's only doing that to ensure it has enough food on hand to feed its large population, something the country has struggled with historically, the data indicates otherwise. China expert and author Gordon Chang argues that the only way to describe the Chinese Communist Party's large agricultural purchases is to call it what it is: hoarding. They are hoarding, he said. They of course will never admit to something like that. Experts agree that the nation's draconian health policies can partially explain the current scramble to secure food. Many provinces are still facing hard lockdowns, and the situation has been particularly dire. For weeks, residents have been under stay-at-home mandates in an effort to curb the number of virus cases, and other areas could be next. Unfortunately, yes, lockdowns are prompting just about everybody to hoard, and it's not just in lockdown cities, said Stanley Chow, author of Selling to China. Chinese citizens are hoarding even in cities that just got out of lockdown or have no threat of lockdown. Chow revealed that his contacts are seeing people still lining up at grocery stores to buy up everything from flour, rice, meats to vegetables and baby food. Those who can afford to use grocery delivery services are ordering up to 6 weeks worth of groceries, while others load up on meats and frozen vegetables to last up to 6 weeks without having to step foot outside to buy food, he said, describing the environment as a mass hysteria, with residents taking their cues from provinces where they're seeing people survive on minimal rations or complaining about little or no food for weeks. On the other hand, Chinese officials are telling people not to worry about facing the lockdowns, but according to Chow, the people aren't taking any chances. People are just extrapolating and saying, if it happened before, it'll happen again. On a similar note, Alicia Hayer, an expert on China and food security, said the rush to hoard food supplies were sparked by people observing other cities' food rationing. Chinese citizens also know that the government will not release information to make their daily lives smoother and enabled planning for daily commodities, such as food, if the information provides evidence of failed policies. For its part, the Chinese government censors were ordered to open a campaign of comment flooding to hide posts about local food shortages, according to leaked directive published by the China Digital Times. Here we have Yili, home to about 4.5 million people, and is believed to have been first put into lockdown in early August without official public announcement after a new virus outbreak. In recent days, social media has seen a surge of posts about food shortages, delays, or refusals of medical care. All these posts about Yili scenery and food are coming from alternative accounts. Nice job, government. Have you ever heard of maintaining a shred of dignity? Said one Weibo user. This is really happening during the Yili epidemic. The locals have tried many things to let the outside world know about our circumstances here, said another one. We're locked inside and don't have enough supplies. Yet they open the tourist scenic areas. Help us, please help us here. Help the Yili common people, the third commentator wrote. The big irony is that even as it encourages residents not to make a run on grocery stores, the government has been stockpiling massive amounts of food and other commodities. A report published by the state-controlled Economic Daily in January found that China's rice and wheat inventory can feed its people for almost 2 years, which leads us to the question of why the population of the biggest importer of food supplies of 2022 is still facing food shortages. Geopolitical strategists say the country is keeping most of its imports on its reserves in an attempt to weaponize them later as global conflicts continue to escalate. Chinese leaders who are deeply paranoid and insecure, and the best of moments are even more so now. China is keeping its strategic food stockpiles at a historically high level. Although the United States can't stop the Chinese from buying up everything, the experts said there is a possibility that the U.S. government down the line might opt to block the export of agricultural products. If China's hoarding gets out of control, U.S. authorities are getting furious with Beijing for draining the global commodity market, and they've been expressing their growing frustration with the Chinese measures in recent days. We would like to see China act like the great power that it is and provide more grain to the poor people around the world, said James O'Brien, head of the U.S. State Department's Office of Sanctions Coordinations, noting that China has been a very active buyer of grain, and it is stockpiling grain at a time when hundreds of millions of people are entering the catastrophic phase of food insecurity and facing acute shortages for months on end. O'Brien informed that 40% of grain shipments from Ukraine in April have gone to China alone. Similarly, Gordon Chang also pointed out that many developed nations that never face difficulties to ensure international supplies before will be struggling with each other to ensure their food supply. He fears that the next geopolitical conflicts could be fought over food, and while that may be a worry for the future, it still affects the present as China's stockpiling continues to impact food prices. Prices will go up. That will be imminent, and it will continue. For its part, the Chinese government is ludicrously accusing the United States as the one who is weaponizing food, since it is the U.S. that is weaponizing food and profiting from the practice. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments below. Whether the world can avoid a food crisis next year largely depends on how cooperative the U.S. will be with the efforts of the UN and other members of the international community. That quote is from the government-controlled China Daily. But the truth is that the United States is far and away the biggest donor to the World Food Program. The idea that the U.S. is weaponizing food is simply absurd. The accusation implies that Western sanctions on Russian food exports are to blame. But in reality, Russian grain and fertilizers were only temporarily subject to U.S. or European sanctions during the months of April and May when Western allies banned Russian ships from their ports. Experts have argued that the U.S. sanction was largely symbolic, given that Russian ships carried less than 1% of the cargo arriving at U.S. ports, and apart from a ban on energy exports. No bans on food exports are in place right now. As the European Commercial President explains, Russia and China are the real food weaponizers, and their populations would end up being left to pay the price. This is a cold, callous, and calculated siege by Putin on some of the most vulnerable people in the world. She stressed, "Food has become now part of the Kremlin's arsenal of terror, and we cannot tolerate it." The China Daily spin on sanctions is in line with Kremlin disinformation, which has tried to divert attention from the costs of a conflict that has victimized tens of thousands and created ripple effects affecting economies around the entire planet. That is such an unfounded lie. That one report published by Risk Consultancy indicates that China is actually the one diversifying its supply of critical natural resources to shore up its ability to weaponize trade against its geopolitical rivals. If China has a soft underbelly, it is its high dependency on foreign natural resources. One way the country is diversifying its import sources is by buying stakes in overseas companies. Doing that will increase the proportion of Chinese-owned resources and the country's total imports. China is seeking to strengthen its control over global supply chains via overseas investments and partnerships with international majors. Beijing has been supporting Chinese state-owned enterprises to go global and establish control of resource bases overseas since the late 1990s. Our data shows China is pivoting towards more autocratic regimes that represent great disability for its supply lines than democracies that are or may become hostile to Beijing, but is also using its massive market as a source of diplomatic leverage. By securing diversified sources, China will be in a better position to weaponize trade with geopolitical rivals, while at the same time increasing the economic dependence of new and existing partners. While the Eastern nation continues to seize a larger share of food products from international suppliers, the United States is left scrambling to find alternative solutions, and new data shows that it's falling behind. For example, China just made the largest corn purchase since May 2021 last month, totaling 1.084 million tons. That's a 50% rise from a year ago. That number of corn imports dwarfs those of the United States, which were estimated at 57.8 million tons. The United States is now experiencing extensive corn shortages, and consumers are already being impacted. Arizona farmer John Post is warning that the entire U.S. food supply chain is being affected, given that corn is used in the production of fertilizers, animal feed, and a series of food staples we buy and consume regularly. On top of that, nearly 40% of the U.S. corn crop now goes to ethanol. The share increases every year, amplifying price pressures when the market is tight. The United States is also a major corn exporter, and due to its long-term contracts with other nations, it is forced to ship the considerable share of its corn production overseas. The farmer forecasts prices will rise from 10 to 20% this year, and we expect the corn shortage to continue throughout 2023. In the meantime, shoppers are still seeing empty shelves and prolonged shortages of everyday necessities. Different from China, U.S. social media is full of images of their supermarket aisles and signs explaining the lack of available food and other items. Stores such as Target, Costco, and Walmart have apologized to customers for the shortages. "We're really seeing the perfect storm we've been warned about," said Phil Lempert, editor of the website supermarketguru.com. "We've become really reliant on kind of that just-in-time supply chain, and I think what we are seeing is that things are just getting off track right now. From tomatoes to tampons, product stockouts in grocery stores are threatening to upend the holiday season as Americans scramble to prepare before things get worse. Even more concerningly, a recent report by The Guardian warns that America's failing food system could collapse as the banks did in 2008. The food industry is becoming tightly coupled to the financial sector, increasing what scientists call the network density of the system, making it more susceptible to cascading failure. According to one estimate, 90% of the grain trade is done by 4 major corporations. As they begin to adopt similar practices and pursue similar revenue streams, their businesses will look more and more alike, which may make a single shock to the global food system that much more catastrophic. Unexpected financial or meteorological events can upend not one, but all of their businesses, leaving a huge hole in the market for necessary goods. Furthermore, in the meat industry, 4 companies alone control 84% of the beef cattle slaughter. Those companies are JBS USA, Tyson Foods, Cargill National Beef Packing Company. As they continue to push small meat producers out of the market, our meat food supply chain becomes more and more vulnerable and at risk of shortages and collapses more than ever. Small and independent farmers and ranches are being crushed by these giant corporations. Al Davis, a Nebraska cattle producer and former state senator, emphasized that farm and ranch families are facing a great extinction if we lose that rural lifestyle. We have really lost a big part of what made this country great. The scarcity of supplies we're witnessing is being caused by internal and external shocks to our fragile food system. If it collapses like the 2008 bank crisis, where are we gonna shop? If beef becomes the next baby formula, are you confident you'll have enough or that you'll be able to find it in stores? With the United Nations warning that the number of people living in famine struck all across the globe, region's top 700 million last year is shocking. 100 million increase from 5 years earlier. Experts are urging people to prepare for the coming global famine. John LeBlanc of Cedarville University offers advice on practical ways to get ready. I think people need to do 2 things. They need to stock up on foods that are not gonna spoil, canned goods, packaged goods, sell on and so forth, and anything they can get to put in the freezer. Here in the United States, about 13 million children presently are experiencing hunger, and as food prices go up, as inflation continues to increase gas prices, it all has a compound effect. Explained here, the tailor of bread for the world. With all things considered, it is clear that conditions are sent to deteriorate even further. Throughout history, food shortages have triggered popular unrest. They served as a contributing factor to uprisings that have brought down entire societies, and as we face food uncertainties, due to factors such as our deteriorating relations with other major economic superpowers, the risk of disaster is real, and the consequences are gonna be catastrophic for all of us. After a year of paying the highest food prices in nearly 4 decades, industry insiders are warning that your grocery bill is set to shoot up even higher this winter, and the coming round of increases is gonna be extremely painful. 50, 60, and even 70% price hikes are no longer a threat, but a reality millions of households in the United States are already facing. At this point, more than 1 in 5 American families is reporting food insecurity due to the skyrocketing costs, according to the results of a survey released yesterday by the Urban Institute. Our domestic food production took a massive hit this year, and farmers are fuming, with the situation saying that things are definitely not gonna be okay. Meanwhile, supermarket CEOs and restaurant chains are telling the public to buy and stock up on supplies while they still can, because conditions are only gonna get more complicated from here on. In other words, it's time to get ready for a cold, dark winter, while our hard-working population gets increasingly fed up with the oppressive cost of living and the abusive surge in food inflation that may send some people over the edge. Winter is coming, and so is another price shock at grocery stores. Tens of millions of Americans are already struggling with empty shelves and inflated prices, and according to ReadyWise, an emergency food supply company, U.S. consumers shouldn't ignore food shortage warnings, because these alarming trends are expected to continue and worsen in 2023, with egg prices soaring 40%, chicken and meat prices rising 22%, flour getting 23% more expensive, and even bread facing double-digit price increases. It's clear that the official rate of food and grocery inflation currently standing at 12% and 14% respectively do not tell the whole story. What consumers are seeing when they go to the supermarket is deeply disturbing. A new report published by the New York Times revealed that shoppers are reporting 50 to 70% price increases at their local supermarkets. Susan Pollock, a property manager from Marina Del Rey, California, said that at a local Costco, a 5-pack of short ribs is almost 70% higher than a year ago, jumping from around $60 to $200 last month. I told my husband we're never having short ribs again, she said. At a Stop and Shop in Elizabeth, New Jersey, Hoggadale, the 35-year-old Instacart shopper pointed out that a single packet of powdered drink mix that once sold for 25 cents shot up to 56 cents, more than doubling in price. Lord forbid if you have a big shop to do, Miss Dale said as she left the grocery store with a customer's order. You're literally penny pinching. This inflation thing is a real problem, another shopper added. When you are paying twice as much to fill your gas tank and twice as much for everything, you've got to say to yourself, well, can I really afford to buy everything I need? As food staples face a price barrel, more and more people are being forced to cut back on spending to be able to make meat. For Angie Goodman, a housekeeper from Culver City, California, who would usually eat meat once a week, the recent spikes that push the price of steak up by 50% mean that she may only be able to eat meat once a month. Miss Goodman, 54, noted that she makes less than $15 an hour, a figure that has remained stagnant as the cost of living continued to climb. Basic things are very expensive, she said. It's crazy. I'm just taking extra loans to pay for my expenses. I'm maxing out on my credit cards. In recent weeks, furious shoppers have flooded the internet with stories on how much the rise in everyday expenses is impacting their families. One of them shared their shopping on Reddit, shocking others with a basket of just 15 items for over $50. When I saw the bill, I definitely felt that America is getting way too expensive to even cover basic needs, he wrote. The bad news is that the next wave of price increases is expected to reflect the ripple effect of over 24 months of disruptions in our food supply chain and our domestic agricultural production. In plain English, prepare your wallets because another blow is coming. Some of the nation's leading food suppliers, farmers, industry insiders, supermarket CEOs, and restaurant chains are all sounding the alarm about winter price hikes. Early last month, Kraft, Tyson, and Campbell Soup all warned they would raise prices on a series of products due to surging costs for labor, packaging, ingredients, and transportation. The Wall Street Journal reported fast food joints like McDonald's, Shake Shack, and Cracker Barrel have also said they will pass on the higher cost of consumers this holiday season. Inflation is real and it's not gonna get any better anytime soon in the restaurant business. Shake Shack CEO Randy Carodi said at the company's latest investor conference. Campbell Soup just revealed plans to raise prices for the 4th time this year, with the rising cost of some products hurting sales to baby boomers. CEO Mark Klaus noted, "We know the pressure that consumers are feeling," Klaus said, arguing that they don't know what else they can do to navigate the current economic environment. On top of that, Tyson Foods said another 24% increase in beef prices is coming before year's end starting this month. And Sanderson Farms, the country's 3rd largest chicken producer, said that the cost of its products is gonna jump 34% during this final quarter. Food maker and processor Hormel Foods shared an even more alarming forecast, given that prices for corn and soybean meal for livestock feed surge 125% and 40% respectively. Prices at the store are gonna go up accordingly this winter. If prices of grain-based meals vegetables and meat at our local supermarkets absorb even a fraction of these spikes, this means we are all in deep trouble. The average American household is already being forced to spend an extra $500 per month on food, according to an analysis from Moody's Analytics senior economist Ryan Sweet. Are you ready to see your grocery bill doubling, tripling, and reaching stratospheric heights in the next few months? Because more than 1 in 5 U.S. households are not. A survey released yesterday by the Urban Institute and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation found that 22% of American families reported food insecurity in September, with food prices skyrocketing at the same time that many of the pandemic relief provisions have ended. Many families and individuals have struggled to afford enough food. Jamie Bartle, Senior Program Officer at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, said in a statement, "Policies need to be put in place immediately to ensure that everyone in every community in America, especially our children, has equitable access to healthy, affordable food." He emphasized, "The outlook is not reassuring. I think food prices are going to continue to increase for probably a good year and a half," alerts Phil Leppert, founder of SupermarketGuru.com. On the same note, Supermarket CEO John Kaiser is urging Americans to buy now because food inflation will only get much worse. "I've seen price increases coming through for the whole year between price increases and shrink inflation, where it used to be 32 ounces. Now it's gonna be 28 ounces. It's anywhere from a 10 to a 50% increase in food prices." The food industry expert encouraged Americans nationwide to stock up on their favorite products to get a better return on your investment, especially if prices soar over the holiday season. Even the USDA is saying that all food categories are expected to increase as we head toward the end of 2022. And yes, that's on top of the grocery price hikes consumers have already been forced to endure throughout the whole year. Those who work in the industry are extremely frustrated with the situation, especially when they're blamed for price increases that are beyond their control. In a recent video, one angry farmer explained why your grocery bill will keep rising. Holly, who operates the family-run farm in Milan, Ohio, used her TikTok account to explain why farmers can see the dark horizon ahead of shoppers in grocery stores. "There are things that we have to buy to keep running. There's something we have to buy that 2 years ago cost us $24. Last year was about $46. This year it's costing us $96. That's a 40% surge in the past 24 months. Another local farmer was drowning in the cost to feed his cattle $8,000 a month, they revealed. "Please understand, food prices are going to go up," she pleaded. "People want to act like it's the farmer's fault. It's not the farmer's fault. We are barely making it to grow the stuff, so you guys are able to get it this holiday season." With increasing desperation, she added, "Guys, this is not going away. Stop sticking your head in the sand and thinking, oh, it's gonna be okay. It's not gonna be okay," she stressed. The truth is that just as grocery prices for certain farm inputs are outpacing the inflation rate, a University of Illinois study reported in April, a general index for farm index prices is more than double the general inflation rate right now, and in the last quarter alone, Quartz reports that U.S. food production costs were up 11% to $437 billion, with fertilizers, which are energy intensive to manufacture, and pesticides experiencing some of the biggest price increases. More than 57% of the fertilizer used in the United States is nitrogenous, and a critical input for nitrogenous fertilizers is natural gas, which can account for 70 to 90% of its manufacturing cost. When the price of fertilizer goes up, those increased costs can show up in the price of food. Moreover, hikes in oil prices, conflicts, emerging diseases, poor governance, and supply chain imbalances, transportation challenges have all come together to create a potentially devastating scenario for our food system, analysts said. These factors have created a perfect storm for a food collapse, Chair of the Academy of the Global Food Economics warned. Adding assault to injury demand for food isn't flexible. Consumers may be able to skip other purchases such as clothing or gasoline, but at the end of the day, everyone has to eat. The big elephant in the room is the need for us to change our diets as a result of increasing demands. Unless urgent action is taken, the experts caution that the crisis could have dire consequences. Changes in the availability of food might alter the way we eat for years. Social conflicts could be aggravated and spread. Purely instability in major urban areas. A breakdown in food systems could throw the entire nation into disarray, explained Chris Barrett, an economist and food policy at Cornell University. A food crisis is a price crisis, he said, stressing that its implications are widespread and touch every person's life, even if they don't immediately realize it. It really is a bunch of crises coming together. Food is a key element of any community's culture. When that element becomes less or is removed altogether, civil turbulence can certainly erupt. Food at its basic level is not discretionary. Mark Hamrick, a senior economic analyst at Bankrate.com. That's the challenging aspect to the circumstances we are in. Consumers are prepared for high prices to persist in the foreseeable future, and it's prudent for individuals to continue to be cautious with their household budgets, he advised. It's belt-tightening time and has been for a while. Hamrick said, unfortunately, the mess has been made. The damage done to our food supply chain cannot be undone overnight. Right now, no matter what actions the government takes, life is gonna get more expensive for all of us and a lot more difficult for millions of low-income families out there. Even if you are well-fed and all your loved ones and neighbors are well-fed, you are gonna be impacted by this. This winter will be a troubling time for all Americans. Anger, frustration, and despair will continue to sweep the United States. It feels like our hard-working population can never catch a break.